us women, sisterhood is so powerful. And it's not a term we use much anymore. It was a really big part of the early women's movement, talking about sisterhood. And we've sort of stopped talking about it. And I hope we haven't stopped doing it. But isn't it amazing to be in a room full of sisterhood? Oh, thank you. I'll take all the claps. And I created something called Own My Life, which is a way of working with women to create transformation and enabling women who've been subjected to abuse to take back ownership of their lives. And the reason it's called Own My Life is because men who are abusive fundamentally believe they own their partners and they're entitled to do what they want to them. And so when we work and support women and when we're on our own journey of recovering after what men may have done to us, there is a need to regain ownership of our lives, or for some of us, gain ownership of our lives for the first time. And since 2020, as you were saying, 21,000 women have gone through an Own My Life course somewhere in the UK or Ireland. And women tell us that the course has saved their lives, has changed their lives. And what we really want to do is build literacy, a bit like Ifia was saying, literacy about abuse, literacy about what's gone in our bodies and brains, and literacy to make sense of those lives. Just to let you know, the timer hasn't started, so just like, I'm not seeing a timer, like I'm just going to keep going. I was going to tell you, and then I'm like, no, better really. And so, sorry, I feel like I just was, and so, we've trained police officers who are delivering Own My Life for police, female officers in the Met Police, female staff. A lot of female officers are married to male officers, and if that male partner is abusing them, they are dealing with police perpetrated abuse. And we've seen that be transformational. Women who are not leaving the police force when they were going to, women seeking promotion, and women advocating differently when women are reporting crimes of domestic abuse. We've seen it work amazingly for learning disabled women and for women who are in addiction recovery and Irish traveller women and women in corporate contexts, because actually all of us need to go on a journey of owning our lives regardless of what has gone on for us. And before I wrote the Own My Life course, I wrote a course called the Day Programme. And since 2011 have been training practitioners to work transformationally with young people to do preventative work around abuse and exploitation. And this is a quote recently from a 17-year-old boy who'd got sucked into the manosphere because his school did an assembly on Andrew Tate, you know, like the gateway to this. You know, like we have to be really careful about becoming Andrew Tate's marketing campaign. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes. So, and what he said after doing Day was, I have so much more respect for women and girls. History in today's society does not give them a break. I have already safely and non-judgmentally called out mates on their so-called jokes and banter. The influencers on TikTok, etc., just melts. And that was through a youth worker working with that young person to help them to recognise that what they thought was true was not. And so the Day programme continues to work to do that. And I wrote the Day programme when I was 25. I'm now 41 and a grandma, everybody. I know. And I wrote the Day programme and the Own My Life course, really, but the Day programme specifically for 17-year-old me. I'd grown up at 17, I'd grown up in a Christian home, and so there was lots of stuff around faith that was complicated, and some of the things I'd learned about faith, about relationships, I'd learned that sex was a chocolate cake. You put it in a fridge, you stay right out of that kitchen. Don't be going for the chocolate cake. Now, the problem with that is actually we're not being taught whether you were going into that kitchen and having a little, snaffle of that chocolate cake, or whether someone is dragging you in that kitchen and force-feeding you that chocolate cake. And so at 17, I'd also, things like 10 Things I Hate About You and Cruel Intentions were the films of my era. Like, I feel like now I've arrived at a point where there's only some people in the room know what I'm talking about. And those films are about how a good girl saves a bad boy. And those really influenced my understanding. And so when I met a boy, his name was Aaron Swan, and when I met him, I thought, well, he was really beautiful, and he was also really manipulative. And within 6 months, I was pregnant because I'd gone to a Catholic school, didn't learn about contraception. And when you think sex is chocolate cake, it's not teaching about contraception, everyone. Note to everybody here, teach your kids about contraception. Also, my mum thought, she read the Daily Mail and she thought the pill gave you cancer. So if there was a recipe for becoming pregnant at 17, I was like right in the centre of it. And so, he made me hate myself. He made me think that I was worth nothing, that I was stupid, ugly, and fat, and that everything that he did wrong was my fault. He made me do everything imaginable sexually, and I was compliant because I thought doing it with consent made it somehow not as bad. And I ended up in a really very, very traumatized state. This is me when I was 17. I know I had long hair. And there's a few women who say to me, why don't you look like that? You used to look so much nicer. It's really interesting, isn't it, that as women we're pressured to look a certain way, isn't it? That we have to look and conform to particular things. And so when I was 19 and he was also 19, he got convicted of sexually abusing a teenage girl after I reported him to the police, and he was put on the sex offenders register for 5 years, which meant I became married to a sex offender, and I got punched in the face by a neighbour on one occasion, guilt by association. I reported him to the police for abusing another teenage girl, and I was asked by the police officers involved, don't you think it's time you stopped introducing him to teenage girls? And when I was 6 months pregnant with my son at 21, my then husband, thankfully now ex-husband, raped me, and my son was born 3 months premature, and we had to live in a hospital about an hour and a half from our hometown. And I was thinking, Mary Carmen, when you were talking about working with tiny babies in paediatric units, it's a particular life to look after babies who are very, very sick. And so we lived in a hospital with my 2.5-year-old and a very sick baby for about 5 months. And when I was in that hospital, I ended up reporting him to the police for assaulting me, but during the time he was on bail, he manipulated me into sleeping with him. And so when it went through the court case, he was found not guilty, and I became very, very traumatized. I ended up on a really high dosage of antidepressants, and I was essentially quite mad. And I ended up with loads of resources that helped me to recover. I had loads of trauma therapy. I had friends and family who supported me. But most importantly, I learned about feminism, and I learned that my experiences were not personal, they were political, and that I was part of, that it wasn't just that I was subject to this abuse in an isolated bubble, but I was subject to it because of a wider system of power, because of what I'd been taught about sex being like a chocolate cake, because of the films and the magazines and the messages that had been around the society that I lived in. And so I managed to recover. I got remarried, very long story. It was to a man, I should say, because some people have watched the film and thought that he turned me into a lesbian because of how I look, but he actually didn't. One of my daughter's siblings, she's 14, and her friends were like, so did he turn her into a lesbian? Nobody became a lesbian. Anyway, so just to let you know, so I married a man, and we've been married for nearly 20 years. I always feel honoured when anybody thinks I'm a lesbian, because lesbians are the brilliantest women, but you know. And so I did recover and got better. And I had opportunities to work with women in groups. I had opportunities to do a theology master's, actually, and to start to build faith communities that can support women. And I wrote Day, and I wrote the Oh My Life course. And then in 2021, my teenage daughter did what teenagers want to do, ruin your life. If you are in the stage where you have a teenager who's want to ruin your life, I know some of us have got great teenagers, stick it out. They're not going to be like that forever. forever. And I promise. She's great now, she's 22. And so she contacted him on Facebook, and I got catapulted back into his life, and I discovered that he had been serially raping women for 20 years while on the sex offenders register, and nobody had held him to account. And so I ended up working with the other women that he'd abused, well, 3 of them, and I supported them through a court case in which he was finally found guilty and put in prison forever, everybody! Yes! And he tried to divide and conquer women by turning them against each other. And that's what the world tries to do, turn us against each other. And we have to fight against that. And my life is incredible. I'm doing a PhD. I have the most awesome grandbaby. And at least a quarter of us in this room have a story like mine. And at least, you know, all of us know a quarter of the women in our lives have got a story like mine. And so I wanted to say, and I wanted to bring on the joy, because actually I didn't get justice, some women did, and I sleep a lot better knowing he's in prison. But we can always have joy. My middle name is Joy, actually. Like, actually true, that's true. And so to be bold is to be joyful, regardless of what life throws at us, and we have to go through all of the healing we need to do, but we can own our lives and we can live with joy. So I hope that as you go from here, you don't go, oh, that woman had that sad story. I hope you go away and remember that there is always joy, regardless of where we find ourselves. So thank you.